Imagine the ocean, an infinite sheet of metal beneath the moon, and upon it steel behemoths whose guns roared louder than any storm. This was the era of battleships, the 1930s and 40s, when knight-like sailors in their iron armor ruled the waves. Battleships weren't just ships. They embodied the naval might of empires. Japan, Britain, the USA, all vied for the throne of the oceans, building flotillas where each giant could tear an enemy apart from 10 kilometers away. I remember being mesmerized as a child, flipping through old photos. These monsters, a block long, with turrets that could level a mountain. They symbolized invulnerability. Why? Because in the era of large fleets, unsinkability was the holy grail. One wrong maneuver and the entire fleet could be lost. Armor half a meter thick, compartments that sealed breaches like a warrior's wounds. This gave admirals the courage to defy storms and foes. But wait, what if I told you that this very armor became their curse? Let's dive deeper. Take a story that has always gripped me like an anchor to the soul. Imagine medieval knights. In shining armor, they charged into battle, confident that spears and swords couldn't touch them. And then cannons appeared. The armor that saved them from arrows became a tomb, heavy, clumsy. The same thing happened to our knights of the sea. Battleships, these armored titans, were built for duels on the waves. Turret against turret, salvo after salvo. But the world changed. The sky became a battlefield. Aviation a new witch sowing torpedoes from above. And so, in 1937, in a secret shipyard in Japan, the samurai's dream was laid down. The battleship Yamato, the largest in history, 72,000 tons, main caliber 460 millimeters, guns that could pierce a cliff, armor, unique, multi-layered, like a dragon's hide. The Japanese whispered, "Unsinkable." By 1939, it was launched, trials showed the beast roared. And in 1941, as the world was already ablaze, the Yamato entered service, flagship of the combined fleet. Admirals raised toasts. It is the spirit of Japan, but reality loves to play tricks. In 1943, it was modernized, anti-aircraft guns were added because the sky was darkening with shadows. And in October 44, off the Philippines, the Yamato went into battle. The operation was an epic fail. American planes swarmed like locusts, while the Japanese had no air cover of their own. The battleship fired into the void, its power useless. Why are we blind? The captain must have wondered, as torpedoes scraped its sides. This was the first crack in the myth. Aviation reigned supreme. Aerial torpedoes struck below the waterline, where the armor was thinner. Battleships, these knights, suffocated without support from the sky. And the culmination, April 7th, 1945, Operation Tengo, almost a suicide mission. The Yamato led a tiny escort to Okinawa, to ram the Americans, to stem the invasion. The admirals still believed, unsinkable, but the sky opened its maw. About 300 planes, wave after wave. Bombs, torpedoes, hell. After hours, the giant listed, explosions tore its soul. The Yamato sank, taking 2,500 souls with it. The myth had crumbled. By design, it was indeed stronger than a cliff. The rumors of unsinkability weren't lies. But a new era, aviation and torpedoes rewrote the rules. Large fleets became targets, not kings. You know, every time I think about this, I feel a pang, as if I lost a childhood friend. These giants taught us, strength without adaptation is a tomb. What if I told you how this monster was born? Behind the scenes of the Yamato, secrets that could have turned the tide of the war. Stay with me, the next block is pure thriller. And if this gripped you, give it a like. Let's dive deeper into history together. Imagine a secret shipyard in Kure, Japan, 1937. The night is ink black, and under the cover of darkness, a keel is laid not just for a ship, but for a weapon capable of turning the tides of oceans. This is the birth of the Yamato, the dream of admirals who, after the failure at Tsushima in 1905, swore, "Never again." The Japanese fleet, the combined fleet, yearned for a king of the seas, a battleship that would eclipse all others. The technical specification? Insane. The most powerful in the world, 72,000 tons displacement, 263 meters long, like 3 football fields laid end to end. Why? So that in an era of large fleets, one blow from the Yamato could break the enemy's spine. The admirals believed this would ensure invulnerability. Now, imagine my first encounter with models of such giants in a museum, my heart pounding as if to an epic soundtrack. What if this beast truly is invulnerable? I thought then, and here's the answer: yes, on paper. Let's break down what made the Yamato a legend. Its main caliber, 460 millimeters. Guns, each barrel weighing 160 tons. A shell like a bus, flying 42 kilometers. 9 of these in 3 turrets, a salvo that shook the horizon. The Japanese whispered, "This is the voice of the gods." And the armor? Unique, multi-layered, up to 650 millimeters on the belts, thicker than any of its peers. Decks, turrets, even magazines, all clad in armor that could withstand a nuclear strike. Almost double-bottom compartments, pumps that swallowed water faster than a tsunami. The admirals beamed, "Unsinkable." But here's a micro-detail that always fascinates me. Like a forgotten blueprint in an old atlas. These super-heavy turrets, each one 2,500 tons. Rotate them manually? Impossible. The hydraulics groaned, the traverse speed just 2 degrees per second. Slow like an elephant in a fog. But for the samurai of power, this was the embodiment. Not speed, but a force that would crush the world. Imagine the crew, 2,700 souls. They knew, we are in a fortress on the waves. And now, the culmination of construction. 1939, launch day. The Kiza River, thousands of eyes, the imperial flag. The Yamato slides into the sea like a dragon from a dream, and the dance of trials begins. 27 knot speed, maneuvers that churn the foam. 2 years an engineer's hell, but in 1941, as Pearl Harbor echoes, she enters service. The flagship of the fleet, the heart of Japan. I recall a photo from that day. Sailors in white, a salute, and a shadow vast as destiny. This was the peak of faith in invulnerability. But what if whispers of weaknesses were already creeping through the cabins? You know, digging through archives, I stumbled upon engineers' letters, a mix of pride and fear. The Yamato was born like a god, but gods fall. And what was hidden behind those steel walls? The life of the crew, secrets that could save or doom. Stay with me. The next section will dive into daily life aboard, where myths met reality. If this awakens the same boy at the ship model in you, like and comment. Would you have believed in invulnerability? Subscribe, and we'll continue the voyage together. Now, with the Yamato breathing the sea, launched in August 39, commissioned on December 16, 41, the admirals began to weave a web of legends. Imagine, combined fleet headquarters, maps under lamps, and then Kenjuro Otsuka, a vice admiral with eyes like steel, rises and proclaims, "The Yamato is a fortress on the water, unconquerable and formidable." A quote that echoed through cabins through Tokyo. Why? Because after Midway in June 42, where Yamato loomed behind the aircraft carriers like a giant's shadow, never firing a shot. That phrase became salvation. The fleet's morale was cracking defeats, loss of air wings. And the Yamato? A symbol. She will withstand everything. Torpedoes, bombs, storms. Admirals boasted about her in meetings, in letters to the emperor. Unsinkable. I remember hearing recordings in an old documentary, voices full of fire and shivers. This wasn't just a ship, it was faith. But let's dive into how this legend lived. November 4th, 37. Keeling in Kure, a secret guarded like a samurai code. By 42, at Truk, Yamato, was a floating headquarters where admirals drank sake to the unconquered. Morale soared. The crew of 2,700 souls felt they were in an impregnable citadel. Imagine a young sailor. He touches the armor, whispers, "We are gods of the ocean." This unified them, gave them courage on patrols. When in December 43, the submarine Skate struck her side with a torpedo. The damage was serious, a hole, water gushing, but Yamato limped to Kure for repairs. January-April 44. Modernization, fresh paint, and the legend grew stronger. See? Even sharks can't get her. Admirals used this, speeches, posters, even hints in newspapers. Why? The war was changing. Aviation roared, aircraft carriers ruled, and battleships were yesterday's news. But the myth kept the fleet afloat, masking fear. And here's a micro-secret that always hooks me, like an old postcard from a veteran grandfather. This faith was blind. The legend boosted morale, yes. Soldiers fought more fiercely, admirals planned more boldly. But overestimation. In June 44, the Philippine Sea, Yamato was in formation, but again a shadow. Planes tore Japanese air wings apart. The battleship fired into the sky in vain. And in October 44, the culmination. Operation Tengo, the breakthrough to Okinawa. Yamato led, admirals shouted, "Unsinkable!" and sent her into the maw. 300 planes, waves of bombs. She sank like a pyramid in the sand, a symbol of power, but useless, like the Great Wall against planes. Morale soared and crumbled. Overestimation in a war where speed beat mass broke backs. And now, imagine how the myth of unsinkability began to crack. We spoke of the admiral's faith, of morale that soared on the wings of legends. But war is no fairy tale. It whispers, the sky changed everything. Aviation, not guns on the horizon, but a swarm of shadows from above, torpedoes falling like lightning, bombs tearing steel to shreds. Battleships, these knights in armor, suddenly became targets. Why? Because unsinkability rested on duels in the fog, not on a squall from the clouds. I remember the first time I watched footage from the Pacific, black and white, grainy, and my heart clenched. The ocean boiling, and the sky like a hive of fury. What if one battleship against 100 air wings? I thought, and here's the answer, the end of an era. Let's go back to how it broke her back. By April 45, with Japan writhing in a vice grip, the admirals still clung to the myth. But the echo of mistakes lingered. In October 44 at Leyte, Yamato already sensed trouble. Aviation tore the fleet to shreds. And now the culmination. Operation Tengo, a desperate dash. The giant put to sea its goal, to break through to Okinawa, to bite into the American fleet, to buy time for the samurai. The escort, a handful, fuel running low. The crew at their stations, armor gleaming under the sun. Sailors exchanged glances. We will endure. The legend is with us. The ocean was smooth, turbines sang. But the radar chirped, and the sky came alive. A microflash of hell. April 7th, dawn. First shadows on the horizon, then a swarm. About 300 American planes, Corsairs, Avengers, from carriers Bunker Hill, Hornet. The sky filled, the roar of engines, like heavenly thunder, diving like hawks on prey. The first attack, torpedoes from the waves, striking the side. The giant shuddered, water rose like a wall. Anti-aircraft guns roared, flashes, tracers weaving a net, but they were overwhelmed by numbers. The second wave, bombs that tore through the deck, fire licking the turrets. Imagine. Smoke billowing, sirens wailing, shrapnel, like hail from hell. One survivor in his diary. The sky went mad. We fired up, and death rained down. The legend melted, torpedoes ripped through the waterline where the armor was weaker, compartments drowning in chaos. A torrent of fire, and the myth exploded like a powder keg. And now, the culmination where the myth of unsinkability is shattered to pieces like smoke over the ocean. We've seen the birth of Yamato, the legend that unified the fleet, and the challenge from the sky that broke the rules. But October 44 off the Philippines, a harbinger. Yamato in formation, her guns roaring, but U.S. aviation dominated. Japanese planes dwindling, the battleship a blind force in a swarm of shadows. Admirals whispered, "That was a lesson." And now the finale, April 45, with Japan in agony, Okinawa in pincers. Operation Tengo, a desperate raid. Yamato departs Tokuyama on April 6th, escort 5 destroyers and the cruiser Yahagi, fuel for 10 hours. The goal? To break through to Okinawa, sow chaos among the Americans, run aground, and become an impregnable battery until the last shell. The commander, Vice Admiral Ichimura, knows it's suicide, but the myth pushes them forward. I imagine their faces on the bridge, a mix of samurai honor and quiet dread. We are the shield of the empire, they think, and the sky is already watching. A micro-mystery of paradox. Yamato, a king of specifications. 460mm guns that could tear a fleet to shreds, armor that laughed at torpedoes. Superiority on paper, but a viral vulnerability. Aviation, the new plague. The U.S., Task Force 58 under Mitchell, sends 386 planes, Hellcats, Corsairs, Avengers. The tactic? Cold-blooded. Avengers reconnaissance catches the target at 8:30 a.m. on April 7th, 200 miles from Okinawa. Waves of attacks are a classic. Torpedo planes dive from 3 sides. Dive bombers rip open the deck. The first wave at 10:20, torpedoes strike the side. Yamato lists. The rudder jams at 15 degrees. Anti-aircraft guns roar 150 guns. Tracers weave a hellish web, shooting down 10 planes, but the cost, 12 U.S. pilots. Second, third bombs tear turrets, torpedoes find seams. The giant takes 11 torpedoes and 7 bombs. Compartments drown. Fire licks the magazines. The paradox burns. A steel titan, invincible in a duel, writhing under a hail from the sky. And here's an anecdote that always hits me like a wave in the face. From the mouth of a survivor, Naoshi Ishida, one of 280 saved out of 2,775 souls. "We called her Unsinkable," he recalled, "and she became an unsunk cemetery. Water gushed, steam boiled, and we, like ghosts, clung to the wreckage, whispering, 'Why did the armor betray us?' At 14:23, the culmination. A massive explosion of B turret, a mushroom cloud of smoke 100 miles high. The crew in hell, almost all who had held on, were swept into the abyss. Yamato capsized, sinking stern first. The myth is dead, debunked by the power of wings. The admirals who boasted of a fortress are now in silence. You know, rereading these stories, I feel an echo, as if I'm standing on that deck, salty wind in my face. Paradox teaches, power without flexibility is a grave. What if this end echoes in our battles, from drones to cyber attacks? The next section, the legacy of Yamato, lessons that will save tomorrow. If the last battle shook you, like it in the comments, would you have broken in that hell? Subscribe, and we'll close the epic with a triumph. And now, as the echo of Yamato's last explosion fades into the waves, let's draw a line. We've traced the journey from her keel laying in 1937 at Kure Shipyard, the largest battleship in history, with 460mm guns and armor that whispered of invulnerability, through her launch in 39, commissioning in 41 as fleet flagship, modernization in 43 with anti-aircraft guns, to those October days of 44 off the Philippines, where U.S. aviation showed power is useless without wings, and the culmination April 7, 45, Operation Tengo, the suicidal raid to Okinawa, where 300 planes tore the myth to shreds. Yamato sinks, the admirals are silent, but what remains? A legacy not rust on wreckage, but lessons that echo in the world's strategies. Imagine, I stand by a model in a museum, and suddenly I realize, this giant isn't just steel, it's a mirror of wars. First, lessons in technology and tactics. Yamato, the pinnacle of the big battleship era, a symbol of power that ruled the oceans since the 30s. 72,000 tons, armor up to 650mm. She could destroy a fleet in a duel. But the new era, aviation, torpedoes, and then missiles rewrote the rules. In 45, she fell under a hail from the sky, marking the end of battleship dominance. Naval strategists worldwide paused. Invest in Titans or in wings? Today, aircraft carriers and drones are her echo. Japan lost its flagship, but gained a lesson: adapt or sink. I remember leading Yamato into battle in a World of Warships simulator, adrenaline, salvos, and thought, what if the admirals had seen missiles? Would myths have broken faster? The micro-mystery of its legacy. It lives on in museums, like a ghost. The Battleship Yamato Museum in Kure, opened in 2005 near the very shipyard where she was born, is a portal into history. A huge 1:10 scale model, replicas of shells weighing tons, exhibits on construction and battles. You walk, touch the steel, and get goosebumps. Here they whispered of unsinkability. And in popular culture, Yamato is an eternal star. The 2005 film Yamato, an epic about the crew, from Leyte to Okinawa, where tears and salvos tear at the soul. Games like World of Warships or the old Bandai on PlayStation. There she's the king of servers, but with vulnerabilities that teach. One torpedo salvo, and it's over. Even in the anime Space Battleship Yamato, a sci-fi version where the ship saves the galaxy, a fusion of nationalism and hope. She's a reminder. Myths fall, but legends rise. You know, wandering through Kure, I felt a pang, as if Yamato was whispering, don't repeat the mistakes. Her legacy is in strategies that save fleets, in films that awaken hearts. What if these lessons echo in our storms, from cyber wars to space? This is the end of the main voyage, but ahead, a conclusion where we'll tie the threads together. If Yamato touched your soul, like it, in the comments, what lesson did you take away? Subscribe, and the legend is with us forever.